Alright, so I have some watercolor markers I'm going to demo here. And the idea behind watercolor markers is that instead of being alcohol soluble, they are water soluble. Things that are water soluble are also typically alcohol soluble because they're just kind of soluble in liquids, and water is a component of the alcohol that markers use. So these markers are by Faber-Castell, and they have a brush kind of end and a fine point, almost micron-esque end. And they are water soluble. I just have this tiny collection of colors, but like I said, if somebody were to try these and really like them, I could probably be begged into picking up some more, since these are probably my favorite markers because I'm a watercolor artist. Yeah, I got them at Blick. They do have a more limited color range than a lot of alcohol markers. And like I said, because they are water soluble, they're also alcohol soluble. But how these work is they tend to lay down pretty much like a normal marker. And I have had my best luck with trying any blending with water pretty quickly. So I haven't done a ton of testing to see like how quick that actually needs to be. I should have grabbed a paper towel. I'll go grab one here in a bit. But I have these water brushes, which is if I am not in my studio or not sitting at a table where I have like a glass and brush set up, this is kind of my preferred travel method. And so I brought them in just because I thought that they might be a little nicer to use for things like the watercolor pencils and the watercolor markers. And you can just squeeze them, and then I usually have a paper towel handy, and I just squeeze enough to get the bristles wet when I'm using these markers. And you can see that it lifts up off the paper, and the marker paper tends to go pretty limp. It is not made to get very wet. So you can do some blending on the marker paper, but it's kind of rough because it just doesn't want to take this amount of moisture. If you could probably, I just thought of this, but you could probably fill these with rubbing alcohol, like these markers, with rubbing alcohol, and use them to blend your regular markers. I should try that. Yeah, I would just use like 90% isopropanol from like the drugstore. You know, like a Walgreens or something. So I can lift up a lot of the pigment.
Can you use these on watercolor paper?
Yeah, that's what I'm going to demonstrate next, because this is not super satisfactory to me. I'm like, eh. I'm going to demonstrate it on the mixed media next, and then we will look at the watercolor paper. So mixed media is just like in my sketchbook here. I'm going to pull it over. You can get interesting results. I had a student last semester named Adam, and he did his final project mostly in these, and he did a great final project. I'll see if I can find his. I know I saved it. So if we lay down similar colors, I think they do just lay down pretty nicely as well. This is like a little shiny. Maybe I can turn it down one, and then it won't. We'll see. No, so they just come like a regular marker. It's the blending aspect that is supposed to be watercolor. So now this, I think, blends much nicer on a thicker paper. You're still going to get a little bit of that initial shadow, where it just is, it's just a little darker there. But you can kind of selectively then touch up other areas to try to even that out. And you could be a little bit more liberal with your water on the mixed media paper. The mixed media paper still doesn't like taking a ton of water. And then another thing, you could draw your lines in, like maybe you're drawing in some sort of texture or hatching. And then this is going to mix the colors together because I forgot to grab a paper towel. But brush over them to kind of blend it out and get some of that color. And you can work at it a little bit. The mixed media paper is going to pill faster than a watercolor paper would, or even a marker paper, just because marker paper is so like kind of fine grained and laminated. Now let me grab watercolor paper I have, and we'll compare that. So here is that example, more dry on marker paper as compared to the mixed media paper. We can also do a little, let's see what that looks like. So if you go really fast, you can pick up a lot of it on the marker paper. But if you wait just even a little bit. All right. Watercolor. So the watercolor paper is interesting because if I remember correctly, it was leaving a lot more stain, but it handles larger amounts of water. So let's see what we can do here. So here, sometimes I just squeeze and drip directly onto the paper. And you can still mix. It almost does, like it reactivates this top layer a little bit slower than the marker paper, but less evenly, I think, than the mixed media paper. And I don't think last time we actually experimented on the mixed media paper because we just forgot about it. So I'm thinking that if you wanted to use some of these mixed media is the way to go. Because to me, I can just get kind of a nicer blend going. And I think that just has to do with the fact that it's a smoother paper.
Do you think that would work the same with the alcohol markers too, like if you better
I think for the alcohol markers, it tends to get too streaky for my taste. Just see what happens if we do a few more. Because sometimes the color can really affect, especially with these watercolor-esque products. Sometimes it's like the pigment really matters. Like this yellow looks like it picks up a lot. This salmon, not so much. Of course, that salmon had a little bit longer to dry. I think that my overall thought on these is that I might blend them into watercolors. I don't know that I would be super into using them all on their own. What I do like is the ability to maybe more simply get some fine lines on top, but still come in and, you know, maybe scrub the edges a little bit or brush over it to get a tone that covers everything. I just think your mileage really varies on these. And it really depends on what the effects are that you're trying to get. They might be really useful if you're trying to render like some like very flowy modern art in the background of a piece. And like I said, I'm not dissatisfied with them on the watercolor paper. I'll try drawing kind of an object in here. And I'm going to break usually like my cardinal rule of doing anything and do some like outlining first in this lighter blue, just because usually we end up still being able to see the shadow of that outline. And we'll see if that is true here or not. Y'all can see that, okay. And then let's give this a little leg. I don't actually know how I want that leg to connect. Should have thought about it. Here I am making kind of terrible legs, but oh well. Alright. And then let's maybe do like some leaves here. I will say I do like how these lay down on the mixed media paper more than I like how a regular alcohol marker lays down. I think it's a lot smoother. And I think it's just that they're open a little bit longer to blending, so they don't dry quite as fast. My guess would be, I'm just looking to see if this says, okay, so they're like a type of India ink is what the pigment is here, which is a water-based ink. Although some India ink is water fast. So that's kind of nice for being able to fill in things very quickly. And I do think Adam was working on a mixed media paper or a Bristol of some type. And he wasn't using a ton of water. And then the last thing that I wanted to try was what happens if we have an area that is already wet and then we draw right next to it, because that is a thing that you can do in watercolor, where if you draw right next to it or in the line, is it'll get fuzzier and diffuse. It doesn't diffuse too much, so it looks like you would want to have a brush. But you can make that a nice soft line as opposed to a really harsh line. So I don't know if I'm either here nor there on them, other than I do think I like them better as far as being a possibility for the, if you want to use a Bristol, or probably a mixed media would be best. And I do have some mixed media paper for this project if you want to try it. It's a little bit more useful, I think, for the color pencil.
So would these be used for our vignettes then?
You could if you would like to, or if you would like I said, I have really limited colors, but you could also, if you wanted to play with them and then use them for the final, you could kind of give me a list of requested colors and I could go get them. We could look at them online too and see what colors they actually even have.
Okay.